the last song that I want us to touch on a little bit is Better When, which is the song that that closes the album. And for me, I would say that it in addition to Mama Please, or maybe second to Mama Please, that it reinforces this idea of social justice as intimately tied to the sacred, right? And I mean sacred, like not exclusively religious, right? But spiritual in the sense, or like in the Muslim tradition, we say that we can serve God by serving humanity, right? But I'm also thinking about those things that we hold sacred, like life and love and freedom and access and opportunity. I'm thinking about MLK's beloved community concepts, and just that social justice and freedom seeking are intimately tied, right, to love and to the sacred. So I want to play this clip from Better When, and then I'll come back and ask you all just to chat a bit about that.
You sing with sages and I paint the pages. So much better than, so much better when we mend in the minds and we bring back the shine.
That good old boy behavior. Never thought we would make it, even when put blood on the wager. Heaven is a mile away, but a little too far to save it. They said, prayed on a downfall, even when they got the devil as a neighbor. A neighbor as a neighbor. But maybe it was just a ghost. Or maybe it was just a group of folks transforming people into ghosts. History. Hey, can a dream with a hole in it float? How much better would we really be if they never invented boats? Would we kill like we kill if they never showed us the ropes? Am I barking around the wrong tree? Saw them and saw the wrong me. But I got the faith of a mustard seed, and I must have seen that I must succeed, and I must believe that we can achieve. Cause we the people who could be the people that can see the people that can free the people.
So, Rami, I've heard you say that you all did not set out to make a social justice album, which might surprise people who know you in your work, right? That wasn't the explicit intention. And yet here's this album that in its exploration of love, really loves justice, right? And it loves justice, it invites us to love justice, it loves community and invites us to love community, it loves people who came before us, the ancestors and the people who will come after us, and it invites us to do the same. So there's all these invitations that are connected to love and justice. For me, it makes sense to me that this album came to life in the way that it did, just because of who you are and because of who Drea is and who you all are in your daily lives and with your families and with your communities. That like this album, on one level, is, to me, feels like an artistic manifestation of the way that you live your lives and the relationships that you all have nurtured and cultivated over the years. So I asked this question, somewhat tongue in cheek, but also to really invite you all to talk about this, perhaps this concept of organic collaboration as relates to freedom seeking and justice seeking. So the question is, how is a social justice album made without trying to make a social justice album? And in doing that, I want to invite you all to also just talk about some of the features and guests that you have on the album, like maybe to share a story with us of one of your favorite stories about how that collaboration came to be organically. Like, what should people know when they are listening to a song like we just heard with Better When? And what should they know about that collaboration with Phenom, with Otis Moss, with the choir, with, like, how do all of these things come to life, and how did the relationships that you all have and the work that you all do as artists, but also as members of community, flow into organically and support this project?
Did you want me to start? That's for both of us? Okay.
Yes, for both of you, but you can start, Ron.
Okay. Well, I'll say this, that I think one of the most, as some of you know the story, not only did we not set out to really create a social justice album, we really didn't even set out to create an album. I mean, this was Drea taking, a song that I wrote like over a year ago, last year when I wrote in that moment, and, inviting me into this artistic journey and space, and willing to be to be a guide, a vessel. And then it was just one song after the other until the material emerged into a full album, with very common undergirding themes. I think it becomes a social articulations of love and social justice, because part of one of the greatest privileges I have, and I think it was only underscored by being invited by Drea into Buffalo and into her world of Drea, is that just everyone we're around, and I think this is part of what animates me so much in this work. You know, I think I have some people from old school I did sociology at University of Chicago, and I did ethnography there. I just love telling I love the stories of the people, the multifaceted stories, the complexity of the types of people that I've been privileged to be around. They're not just artists, they're social activist warriors, they're mothers, they're people who are their lovers, they're connected to this work. And I think so often we just don't see that in publicly. We're only, especially people of color and people who come from struggle, we're often very, unidimensional in one, just fabric of a particular larger story. And so when you bring the people that we've brought together and we're in space, the expressions of love and spirituality and social justice, they're all just interwoven into the larger collective. And so that's, I think, how the themes and the stories and the writing emerged pretty organically. Two stories that I'll say, and I think he was on here earlier. Ja'Cory, I first met, his MC name was 1200, and now officially he is Councilman Ja'Cory Arthur. You heard him on Mama Please. He is the youngest sitting councilman in Louisville's history. I met him several years ago, and I just knew the moment I saw him on stage in this kind of rich cultural context, that what he emanated on stage would be the type of person I know would be connected to us and our work. I sent Ja'Cory Ja'Cory became a part of our roster, and he was very much embedded in the arts work that we were doing, and just became the type of person very connected to our work. We were connected to his activism and organizing. And while he's running for office, I sent him this track, and I didn't hear from Ja'Cory for like a couple of weeks. I thought initially he just didn't really like it. He wasn't feeling it. And he said, I've been having it on repeat this entire time. And then when he dropped it, we collaborated maybe a day or two before the elections in Louisville. And lo and behold, he went from just being an MC and this extraordinary human being, an artist, to now being this, incoming councilman in Louisville. And I think that was something that kind of spoke to the political moment of the time. In the midst of a pandemic, here you have this brother who's in the streets, very connected to the movement for justice for Breonna Taylor in Louisville, that had all of the eyes of the country on it. And again, none of that was planned. None of that was like orchestrated beforehand. It was just, I knew Ja'Cory's voice needed to be on that track. I knew if anyone could summon the spirit and soul of that voice that was so resonant across the globe, George Floyd had become, and the words "I Can't Breathe" and "Mama Please" were being written on, walls across the world. And I just seemed like out of all artists, Ja'Cory was the one. And, that's just one of so many of these collaborations really happened that way. They were organic. There are people who I've had this deep, abiding love and respect for. And in the process of making it, the work together, some really dynamic and very, surprising things happened. And that was just one of them.
Thank you. I mean, I'm so glad that you shared that story about Ja'Cory. I was thinking as you were sharing about how every artist's contribution elevates and expands a song, and that one of the ways that I feel like Ja'Cory's collaboration did is just in what's the third line of his verse, where Breonna's name is mentioned, right? So that it automatically opens up this idea of even, you know, gender specific violence and what stories are told and how they're told in connection to, you know, the relationship between George's mom to Brianna could have been a mom, you know, was really something that was heart opening. Drea, I would love for you to chime in on this question as well, just about organic collaboration and how community fits into it, you know, how it needs to, how it should, and yeah, just whatever feels right for you in terms of flowing on this question of how is a social justice album made without intending to make it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Rami, he so beautifully illustrated how organically the album just progressed. You know, I think themes progressed. You know, like Rami went from writing one song and sending it to me and sharing it with me, and I responded to that and shared with him what I felt. And then he was inspired to write another song, and then he was inspired to write another song, and then he was inspired to write another song. And then things were happening in the world while we were having this exchange and this like dance, if you will. And so Rami is reflecting and internalizing, and then I'm able to express in a way that was so necessary for me because the whole world shut down in the middle of us doing this project. And I'm an artist first. So you want me to like be in a house, be away from people and be away from community when my very essence, like the very fiber and fabric of who I am and how I create and how I love and how I live my life is threaded with community. Like community is the center of everything that I do. And so that was really interesting. So I desperately needed a way to express what I was witnessing that was happening in the rest of the world, and to be able to do it in a way that wasn't imprisoning. I needed to be able to be free, and I had never did it like this before. You know, normally I would see what's happening in the world and I'll write a song and I record it by myself just so I can get it out. But because of what I like to say, these two pandemics that we're in, because of these two pandemics, then I feel like it was a direct threat on our breath, and also a direct threat and attack on community and how we connect with one another, how we commune with one another. And so the way this album progressed and kind of like just developed its own wings was so beautiful, because I think everybody involved shared that feeling and that need for a human connection. And I think it shows up in Jerusalem. Like even in the beginning, we were talking about the moaning and groanings before. And I know I started, but Maimoni Yusuf, is an incredible person, woman, mother, and artist. She's also on that song. She's singing in the beginning, and then she performs like in a hip hop, offering. And in the beginning, you hear her coming in. Like when she heard the song, she felt like I need to hum right there too. And she's a Black woman, but she's also a native. She's indigenous, and she knows who her tribe is, and she was raised in not only those ancestral practices as like from an African position or seat, but she's also raised in her mother is teaching her songs that the natives used to sing. You know what I mean? Her mother is literally like a healer. Her grandmother and people in her family are medicine women. So she was raised on that. And so her hums and her oohs and her ahs, the way she chose to collaborate with me in that moment, she responded to an invitation. And she was like, I gotta say something right here. So when she sent the track back, we were just expecting a verse, but we got way more than that. And that was an example, a beautiful example I wanted to highlight on how some of the collaborations on the album happened so organically, because I think everything about how the album was created and framed was set up like a big invitation. And that's how I imagine collaborations to be. There is the circle that exists and that we call community. And so when you enter into the community, you need to be invited into the circle, And so I think it was important I think it naturally happened with Rami. Like Rami invited me into his circle by sending me the song. And then I responded to that. And then we invited other people to come into that circle and create and emote and just make their contributions, which I think is so necessary for where we are in the world today. And then even in this discussion of like justice seeking and freedom and liberation, which is like really important to me right now, I just think it's important to highlight that liberation requires community. It requires community. I mean, you think of any activist, any leader, any freedom fighter, you can even talk about Harriet. People often highlight Harriet, and she led all these people, and she absolutely did that. But she would not have been able to do that outside of a community of people. Somebody was waiting for her in a car, and somebody else was making a phone call or sending a telegram to somebody who was operating a boat. And then there was somebody at a house at an unknown location that knew that somebody was going to be pulling up on a horse, and there was going to be some people hiding in the back, and he was going to have to hold them and feed them and keep them warm for a certain amount of time, and then get them to their destination. And then when they got there, they needed something to eat and some place to get cleaned and a little something to put in their pocket so that they can live their lives as free people. So she would not have been able to operate this Underground Railroad had there not been a community. I think that's very important to highlight. And so in this discussion of liberation today, as it relates to this album, which is often, at the center of this conversation of like social justice, we created a community. We created a community. We exist within community. And if we are to even imagine what it might look like to move forward, then we must do that with community. So liberation requires community. And so this album required organic collaborations, or we would not have been able to offer in the way that we did. I think everybody from Phenom to Amir Suleiman to Memor Yusuf, Kadir Latif, even my daughters on the album, Ronnie, everybody, I could go on and on, Jacory, I think they responded to an invitation. And when there's an invitation made from the center or from the circle, then you actually give people the opportunity to show up as they are and to make a contribution that is true and a contribution that is coming from a place of love and purity, and they're able to offer it in a very organic way. So I think organic collaborations are really, really important. And I think that even like the work that we're doing, like, because I have a food pantry here in Buffalo. Rami is working with Iman. I'm also part of Iman on the artist roster. I think, we find ourselves doing this work in the community, and this work needs to be supported, and often the ones who are invited to support this work, they have experience in kind of setting up collaborations, and these collaborations aren't always fostered upon like authentic relationships. So you find yourselves like reaching out to people in the community who might have a similar goal or a similar mission, but you don't actually have a relationship with this person, but you kind of like work with them just long enough, to get the support that you need. And hopefully you can continue to stay connected, but in many cases you don't remain connected. And so I think it's important to, when we talk about organic connections and organic collaborations, that they are rooted in a genuine connections between other freedom seekers and other justice workers and just other humans in general. I think it's so important for us to continue to foster these organic collaborations where people can show up as our authentic selves and really just explore why we're here and help one another, like kind of hold each other's hand, or at least bear witness to somebody else's journey of self-discovery, and in terms of how they'll show up in these community circles.
Yes, 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 yes. It's so good I had my mic on, because I was being your amen corner here, and just like would want to put like an asterisk next to community as a requirement for liberation, right? On just a practice-based level, and that you all, part of the methodology for working and for the way you live your lives is already in a steady practice of building community and connection and relationship, right? So it's not, as you described, oftentimes collaborations in the funding world means put these people together and see what happens. And collaborations in this type of work means what are the relationships that have been nurtured that can give the broadest invitation, include the broadest, widest number of folks, and then allow what comes out of that, right? That what comes out of that is the organic expression, right? And is the thing, and so you gave the secret sauce. That's not an easy, thing to accomplish. It's easier said than done, to this question of how do you create a social justice album without trying to, is that there's no way to do that on with a one-off, with a blind date pairing, right? Like that it has to be connected to relationship, that there's longevity in it, that it has to be connected to community. And the work that Rami does with Iman, and the work that you do with Feed Buffalo, and all of the other things that you all do, right? Like just this practice that you all have of cultivating this, like that's what gives birth to these types of collaborations and the stories that you all have shared with us. So I just really love and appreciate you both for highlighting that.